Part 2. In the morning, after I had my usual quick and refreshing bath in the swimming hole, I sneaked some breakfast into Miss Grayson's room before she was awake enough to complain about me getting rid of her iPod without her permission. Then I drove into town for food shopping. I knew I would have to deal with her later, but there were chores that needed doing first. Out of habit, I stopped off at the dump first and looked around a bit. There was not a great deal of interest to me, but I did find a discarded taser casing. It was clearly not working, but I guessed my captive would not be able to tell the difference. It would be much more convenient than the EtherPad, and it had the added bonus that if I messed up and she somehow got her hands on it, she could not really harm or threaten me because I understood the bluff. A real working taser does not discriminate whom it shocks and could be turned against me. I had seen them in use taking down fanatical insurgents so they could be safely restrained, and I knew for sure that I could not counter it if I was the victim of the shock. I also spotted a couple of old painted armchairs that had been put out for sale. They were a bit worn but sturdy. They would be perfect out on my porch to sit in during the evening, and at $1 each, they were a bargain. I paid the man, loaded them into the back of my truck, and headed on to the food store before filling up with gas and returning home. I checked my messages, unloaded my purchases onto the porch, and left the truck parked where it was because I was going out again later. I had bought 6 cases of bottled water, and I planned to put one of them in her room as her emergency reserve. I had also found her a couple more paperback books and gotten some fresh batteries for the radio, and I gave her a couple of packs of store-made salad sandwiches for her lunch. She did not thank me. Luckily, I was not expecting any gratitude, so I was not disappointed. I ate my own sandwich lunch, changed clothes to put on a clean sweatshirt and a pair of old BDU pants, dropped off my laundry at a service wash, then headed over to the Hamilton construction office to work on my studies at my computer. Harry Hamilton happened to drop by to work on a project bidding document while I was there. He asked how the assignments were going, and I was able to tell him that I was getting mostly A's, thanks to him letting me study at the office. He was pleased with that. He seemed to really want me to succeed. He was a good boss to have, keen for any of us who wanted to progress in our trade to get the chance. There are too many people in the industry who do not want their staff to get better qualified in case they want more money or go work elsewhere. Harry was smart enough to realize that he could not supervise everything himself and that he needed some of us to step up and accept responsible positions if his business was to keep growing. I did as much as I needed to do. I turned off my computer, put my head around his office door, and thanked him again. I picked up my clean and iron laundry, dropped in at a small diner to buy 2 large pulled pork and salad subs and something for later, and headed back to the cabin. Miss Grayson was sarcastic when she saw me in the BDU pants, asking if I had been out in the bushes playing cowboys and Indians, and if I had run away from the little pop gun bangs like a scared child. I just smiled in response. She was still trying to needle me, and it was not going to work. It did not make me like her any better, though. I did notice when I took her a clean towel and washcloth that she had eaten every scrap of the sub. Well, I had enjoyed mine too. The fresh green crispness of the salad balanced the sweet richness of the pork just right. I locked up and left her to her thoughts and took myself on a leisurely stroll around my property until dusk. I saw a couple of deer and watched them for a while. They were weary but not frightened. I guess they felt safe on my land. I might take one for the larder come late fall, but until then, I would enjoy just watching their graceful movements. Her late supper was a big chunk of a meat and onion gravy pie that I had also picked up from the diner. It tasted much better cold than it looked, at least to me. Hers was all gone when I checked on her before I went to bed. So, I guess she had managed to bring herself to eat it. It was the kind of food that people who work for a living enjoy, tasty, nutritious, and filling. So, I was not sure she had experienced that before in her exclusive little world of high society calorie-counting cuisine. She had probably never even eaten leftovers. At home, the servants would have had them and been grateful for such a large portion. She had scowled and sneered again about the BDUs when I had taken her meal in. Forget her and the pampered pedigree Shetland pony she probably rode as a kid. Sunday morning, I relented a little and let her have another bath in the swimming pool, mainly to save the bother of doing it one evening during the working week when I would be tired. I took her the bag of towels and supplies, showed her the taser I had found at the dump, and suggested that she cooperate if she did not want to be zapped. She treated it with appropriate respect, and there was no trouble until I got her back into her room. Then she started talking back again. I was still wearing the BDU pants. And today, I had on a National Guard t-shirt printed with a slogan about being proud to serve our nation and bring peace to Iraq. She tried to tease me. Actually, this time she did a fairly good job and truly got under my skin. She dropped the bag on her bed, turned to me, and started on me. From the length of her rant, I later figured out that she must have been rehearsing it while she was bathing, and that it was about serving your country, pretending to be a soldier. Did you ask your big brother to buy that stuff on eBay for you? I bet you were even wearing camo shorts and socks, and that you have camo pajamas to give you some kind of comfort at night. You were just a kid pretending to be a man. I bet the closest you got to serving is that you once met a guy who had a friend who did a few minutes of kitchen duty as a recruit and cried his eyes out until they let him leave. Besides, Iraq, that is only for the ones who are not cut out for the real challenges. The ones who choose an easy way out. The ones who rely on comfort and convenience, spending their days lounging around, indulging in bad habits, and wasting time. It is not a dangerous place like Afghanistan. It is more like cushy security work with better pay. Oh my, that dreadful insult to our soldiers really struck a nerve. That was not just fake news. That was a downright dirty lie and an insult to the honor of brave men. I slapped her so hard on the ear that she fell sideways onto the hard wooden floor with a heavy thud and burst into tears. My company had served as the honor guard for returning the remains of some of our brave soldiers who lost their lives protecting others, and she wasn't even worthy of their respect. I was trembling with anger so much that I hardly trusted myself not to lose control. Don't you ever demean our servicemen and women again. Some of them may not have had many other career choices, but they stepped up, served their country, risked their lives, and some paid the ultimate price doing their duty on your behalf. You and your privileged crowd disgust me. I backed out of the room, locked the door, switched off the battery-powered lights so she was left alone in the dark, and drove into town, still fuming over her arrogance and ignorance. I was shaking a little. I had almost lost control of myself. She had come that close to getting a serious consequence. I calmed down by having a couple of draft beers at a bar, ordered a burger with all the fixings for lunch, and watched some sports on the TV to relax. After a few hours, I figured I could eat again, so I treated myself to a large pizza, ate half of it with another beer, then drove back to the cabin. I used a flashlight to get to bed and slept soundly until dawn. Monday morning was bright and sunny. I went to the swimming hole for a bath, quietly got dressed, ate the rest of the pizza cold for breakfast, and left for work without checking on her or turning the lights back on. I figured she'd had nearly 20 hours in the dark, and as far as I was concerned, she hadn't served her time yet. She was lucky she wasn't buried under 6 feet of good, fertile soil out in the woods. Well, I'm not stupid. I didn't really mean it. I just wished I had a few wild hogs on my land. I threw myself into physical work that day and was able to temporarily forget her insults. Later, while at the store after work, I thought maybe I'd taken her outburst too personally. Maybe she'd been trying to provoke me just enough to make a mistake and give her a chance to overpower me. She had hit a sensitive spot. Maybe I'd wait another night before going back in. By the time I returned to the cabin that evening with fresh bread and supplies, she'd had over 30 hours without light, human contact, food, or more water. I switched the battery lights back on and made myself a sandwich and coffee, which I ate sitting on one of my new armchairs on the porch. Then I looked through the spy hole and saw her sitting on her bed, hugging her pillow, staring into space. Her expression was unreadable. She looked subdued yet calm, maybe a little out of it. I'd have to be very careful. Maybe she was desperate enough now to do something reckless that might hurt me, even if it cost her more than she managed to inflict on me. We'd encountered insurgents like that, willing, even eager, to risk everything for a chance to hurt an enemy. When they think that way, the only solution is to keep them tightly restrained. Maybe I should have gone all the way and bought a working taser. I didn't want to chain or handcuff her, but I would if it became necessary. I didn't want to injure or kill her either, so I hoped she would be sensible. If she attacked and got hurt, she'd have to heal on her own. I wouldn't take her to a doctor or hospital. If it got really bad, then I'd have to end her suffering and bury her out back. I prayed it wouldn't come to that. I'm not a cold-blooded killer, and I didn't want to become one. After seeing death up close, the blood, the emptiness, I knew it wasn't as simple as it looks in movies or video games. I put some fruit, a couple of sandwiches, 2 8-ounce cartons of cold chocolate milk, and 4 bottles of water on a cardboard tray. I quietly opened her door, slipped the tray inside, then closed and locked the door again. Then I read and studied for a couple of hours, made myself a quick sandwich, and went to bed without checking on her. Tuesday morning, I woke before dawn and decided it was time to talk to her before things got worse. I quickly washed and dressed, started cooking bacon and brewing coffee, then pulled on my ski mask and unlocked her door. She was already awake and seemed much more in control now. Having the light back must have helped her gather herself. I noticed the empty containers neatly stacked on the tray by the door. There were still some full water bottles in the case, so she hadn't been dehydrated. I silently praised myself for planning ahead and giving her a reserve. I had punished her but hadn't risked her health. I stared at her for a long moment before speaking. "Are you ready to apologize for what you said?" She started crying right away. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I never meant to insult our servicemen and women. It's just that my dad always says how proud he is when someone enlists instead of costing taxpayers money in jail. I made assumptions. I wanted to rile you up, but I went too far and said some stupid things. I got so scared when it went dark. I thought you'd left. I was so relieved when the light came back on. I'm sorry for leaving you alone and in the dark so long, but you made me so angry that I didn't trust myself around you." She nodded, agreeing. "Yeah, I guess I can understand that. I've had a lot of time to think about everything. I don't remember all I said, but I know I was trying my hardest to get under your skin, and I see now how out of line I was. Thanks. It's good you've been thinking. I'm okay with you hating me because I kidnapped you, but I'm not okay with you taking that hatred out on people who don't deserve it. When someone chooses to serve our country to keep us safe, they deserve respect, especially if they get hurt or killed protecting us. It's not an easy life. I have to tell you, I thought better of you, Miss Grayson. Much better. I almost believed you had the potential to be a decent person. Now I'm starting to think I was wrong." She flinched as if I'd hit her again. Interestingly, she didn't lash out. It seemed she had been doing some serious thinking and maybe didn't like what she saw when she looked at herself. She looked up, found the courage to meet my eyes, and spoke. That impressed me. This girl had guts. I knew plenty who would have buried their heads and avoided facing what they'd done. I'm so ashamed of myself. I don't know why I said those things. I guess I just wanted to anger you, but I also insulted a lot of good people. I shouldn't have said any of it. Well, I'm glad you realize that now. Did I hurt you when I hit you? She shook her head. I guess I got what I deserved for talking back. More shock than pain. Funny, I never thought you were the violent type. Maybe a real pain sometimes, but you could have gotten a lot worse than you did, only when you push me too far and make me lose my cool. You know something, Miss Grayson? You were the first woman I've ever hit. My folks raised me to respect women, and even though my ex-wife stiffed me like she did, I still hold on to that attitude. Let's just forget the whole sorry episode. You've apologized for disrespecting our service members, and I've forgiven you. Want some breakfast? She smiled weakly, still unsure if I was being sincere or just lining her up for another scolding. Please. Okay. Hey, how about something new? A hot bacon and egg sandwich. She smiled a real smile. Geez, I'd forgotten how good she could look, even with red eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, and messy hair. The look on her face brightened my day. Are you serious? Sure, that's what I'm having. No extra trouble to cook for, either. Real bread as well. Coffee or tea with it? I'd kill for a coffee. I grinned back and risked a joke. You can have one for free. No need to kill me. 10 minutes max. Hey, she actually smiled again. I took another calculated risk. I picked up the tray of empties and closed, but didn't lock her door. I set 2 places at my table, bringing the other chair in from my bedroom, and put the eggs in the pan. I checked again that anything really dangerous was locked up safely. I had moved almost everything there anyway and only brought it back into the main room to use it. Then I plated up bacon, egg, and bread for 2. Then I went to fetch her. Oh my God, I can smell the coffee and bacon. I smiled at her. Come and get it before it gets cold. It's already on the table. She followed me through and sat at the table, looking around, still a bit unsure about being out of her cell. I poured us both a coffee and put the jug back on my side of the room, so she'd have to go through me to get it. I pointed at the pile of bacon on her plate and made some small talk to try to break the ice a little. A friend of mine tried going vegetarian because the girl he moved in with wouldn't eat meat, but he just couldn't get over the smell of meat cooking. He used to hang around diners to get his old factory nerve a good workout. I was eating a pulled pork sub for lunch one day, and he cracked wide open and went and bought himself one too. His girls still loved him after he confessed, so they agreed he could eat whatever he liked once a day. They've got 2 kids now, and she isn't all that strict as long as they eat healthy. I've heard the smell of bacon is the hardest thing for most converts to vegetarianism. I've always tried to eat healthfully. Lots of fruit, vegetables, and salads. But I guess it's difficult for you out here. I don't see a refrigerator. How do you keep things cool? We're way off grid out here. I've got a couple of 12-volt coolers that work for small quantities. I guess if I was staying here, I'd get a 12-volt fridge or one of those gas or kerosene units. Until then, I just buy little and often. Cost a bit more, but any waste is my fault. Just need to plan what I eat. She finished her plate, wiping it clean with another slice of bread. I took it from her along with the silverware and refilled both our coffees. She looked up at me. Thanks. That was good. Sheesh. What do I call you? I smiled under my ski mask. Progress at last. She'd finally realized that building some kind of rapport with me was her best chance of getting through this ordeal. You've already called me most things. Jerk, idiot, fool, scumbag, low life. I guess I should be worried about your talent for creative insults. But hey, we're all adults here. How about Billy Bob, Jim Bob, or maybe John Boy? Are those hillbilly enough for you? Maybe I'm a Jackson, Stewart, or Longstreet. She chuckled, a hint of light returning to her eyes. A decent breakfast and good coffee can do that for you. I figured she'd been worried she'd crossed a line so badly her situation would get worse. Instead, she was caught off guard by a warm meal and a little conversation. You ain't quite as dumb as you make out, are you? I guess you did make it as far as junior high. They did have schools up there in the Wilderness Mountains. That was good too. She was trying to make a joke. Her period of dark solitude hadn't broken her. I puffed out my chest and exaggerated my accent. First in the family to make it that far. First to pass 4th grade. My twin sister, Daisy May, would have done it too if our baby hadn't come so soon. She tossed her head in amusement, trying not to smile, but failing. I could see a glint of humor in her eyes. Why do I get the distinct feeling that you're holding out on me, Billy Bob? I had to laugh. Sure, I finished high school. Can't deny it. I told the school board I'd cut off their supply of shine if they didn't let me graduate. Had that diploma in my hands the next morning. Ink still wet. A genuine high school diploma at age 10. How's that? She grinned at my obvious tall tales. Real impressive. Almost too good to be true. Still think you're holding something back. I'll call you Brains then. Or Bubba. Guess I'll have to decide. Beauregard. Braxton. Bedford. Greenwich. She chuckled. No. And although I'm impressed with your memory of Southern history, I think it's going to have to be Bubba. You're a big enough guy to be a Bubba. I can live with that. She tilted her head that way women do and grinned cheekily. She'd moved a long way from her attitude 48 hours earlier. I bet you can be a real fast mover at a country dance, Bubba. I smiled at the implications of that comment and put on a pained voice. Yeah, I do enjoy dancing, but you're doing me wrong again, sweetie. I'm cultured. I like both kinds of music, country and western. Hey, I'm real well-traveled as well. I've been out of the county several times. She giggled again. It's an old joke about music, old as the hills, but there's enough truth in it that it still amuses. I liked her girlish giggle. It was a side of her character I hadn't yet seen. Not that my kidnapping her had given her much to laugh about so far. Bubba, you're as slick as an alligator's backbone. You ain't fooling me. You've had an education. You might pretend to be a real good old country boy, but you let the odd long word slip out. Did I or did I not hear you use the term olfactory in the correct context a few moments ago? I held my hands up in acknowledgement of the hit. Yes, ma'am, you surely did. That was because of a spelling bee in 4th grade. And old Miss Fraser hooped me real good every morning before class, again at lunch, and finally at going home time, until I got it right every time. It's the longest word I know. I use it to impress people. I've been told that it's more than twice as long a word as nose. That made her laugh too. I realized I enjoyed hearing her laugh and wanted to make it happen more often. Happiness suited her far better than the misery and stubbornness she'd adopted since I kidnapped her. We drank the rest of our coffee in companionable silence. Pity it wasn't going to last. It had been a long 10 days with her either cursing or giving me the silent treatment. I looked at my watch. It was almost 7:45 already. I was late for work. I stood up from the table. I'm truly sorry about this, Miss Grayson. I really am, but I've got to get to work so I can put food on the table. Back to your room, please. I'll bring you some more fruit and greens tonight. The temperature in the room dropped like a stone. She got up without a word and stalked back to her cell. I put another whole case of water, 2 bananas, 2 apples, and a packet of cookies in with her and locked the door. I didn't bother asking if there was anything else she wanted while I was in town. I just knew I wouldn't even get the courtesy of a reply. Oh well, it wasn't unexpected. The talking had been fun while it lasted. Back to normal. I locked up securely, set my telltales, and headed for work. The guys grinned when I showed up so late. They probably guessed something had delayed me, but since it was such an uncommon occurrence, there were no complaints. I thought about Miss Grayson a few times throughout the day. Her 2 days of solitary confinement in the dark had changed things, but I wasn't quite sure yet in which direction. She'd learned the hard way that she needed to stay on my better side, which was good for both of us. Honestly, I'd enjoyed spending time with the bright young woman I found when I got back home that afternoon. Would she be a foul-mouthed troublemaker? A silently contemptuous presence? Or a lonely, scared person in need of some company? After moving my day's groceries into the cabin and locking the door, I donned my ski mask and brought her a carton of mixed fresh fruit slices to start with. She glared at me but accepted the fruit and ate it hungrily, tipping the carton to get the last drops of juice. It must have tasted good, because she actually said, "Thanks," as she handed me back the empty carton. "No problem. Sorry, lunch was kind of light. After getting so worked up with you on Sunday, I messed up on supplies. I bought us some salt beef slices, pickles, and some slaw for supper, with a slice of strawberry shortcake for dessert." She smiled at that. "Sounds good, Bubba. May I have a bath first before we eat, please?" That was a fair request, and she was being really polite about it. She'd bathed in the creek Sunday morning, then totally messed things up by insulting me, and as a result had spent a day and a half in the dark without washing water. I didn't want her getting cabin fever or getting desperate enough to try something foolish and possibly dangerous. Besides, I could use some company. I was getting pretty tired of talking to myself all the time. She'd owe me, so I might even get some conversation if we ate supper together. I don't see why not. There's plenty of time before dark. Give me a few minutes to get everything ready. I moved the truck into the barn and shifted the armchairs further down the porch away from the door, so we wouldn't walk past them. I checked that everything was clear, then opened her cell again. The mere threat of the taser kept her compliant going to and from the creek. I didn't rush her bathing. I let her take her time. I made a mental note to pick up another bottle of the environmentally friendly shampoo that was safe to use in the creek. She'd been pretty generous with it. She definitely looked a lot happier after that dip in the swimming hole in the fresh air. I barred the outer door and let her have free run of the main room while I plated our supper. She dried her hair with a towel, disappeared into her room to comb it in front of the makeshift mirror, then came back looking a whole lot better. I had to admit, I was enjoying the novelty of having company at the table again. I'd gotten used to relaxing with my colleagues over meals in Iraq, and the months since then had been pretty lonely with just myself to talk to. I liked being married, coming home to my little family and hearing what Ally had been up to all day. Despite my mostly solitary life over the last 4 months, I missed conversation when there was none. And from the way she was acting, she did, too. She spoke about the news she'd heard on the radio that day. It was nice chatting with someone who had opinions and the knowledge to back them up. I soon learned she'd been to Europe. She told me how her late Aunt Janie, her father's sister, had taken her over there for a month 2 summers earlier. They'd been to England, France, Italy, and Austria before flying home from Germany. I'd spent 2 nights in Germany on the way to Iraq, but hadn't really seen any of it other than from the airplane window during landing and takeoff at the airbase. She was easy to listen to as she told me about some of the places they'd visited. She seemed pleased to have someone interested, and she looked genuinely happy as she recalled the good times she and her aunt had shared. I leaned back and listened, making occasional comments to show I was paying attention, and she kept chatting. She was a good observer, describing people and places with detail. She hadn't just checked off destinations on a list, she remembered them vividly. It was fascinating. I asked which had been her favorite place. She said Salzburg, because it had preserved its history and hadn't been overwhelmed by cars and modern buildings. The two of them had wandered around without feeling uncomfortable at all. She said in Rome, London, and Paris, they'd spent half their time worrying about gangs of pickpockets they'd been warned about by their hotel concierges. I hadn't talked to anyone like that in a long time. Actually, I wasn't sure Cassie and I had ever communicated at that level. It was a huge disappointment when I realized it was past 11 and time for bed. She was tired too, so she didn't object to going back to her room. She even responded when I wished her good night. Yeah, a nice evening. I slept well. Wednesday morning, I put a travel mug of hot coffee on the breakfast tray, along with a much better lunch. She was awake, and I told her I'd be back on time that night, and we'd go for a walk outside before supper. That afternoon, I found myself happy to be back at the cabin, so pleased that I almost forgot to hide the truck in the barn out of her sight. I'd picked up some salad and a few things at the deli counter, then brought it inside before pulling on the ski mask and letting her out of her room, taser at the ready. We spent an hour or so outside, some walking, some just standing, enjoying the fresh air and calm. It was really quiet and peaceful out here. How far are we from town? I chuckled to myself and dodged the leading question. Yeah, I really like it here. Great spot. Close enough to not be isolated. Far enough to be undisturbed. Had the place a while? Needs a whole lot of work. Not finished yet. Live on your own? Yeah. What's your favorite color? Green with purple stripes. Her giggle gave her away. She knew I wasn't going to volunteer any information. Okay, I get it. You don't want to make it easier for me to track you down and... She cut me off with a mock glare. Bet you with a blunt and rusty Bowie knife after you let me go. I laughed. Yeah, there is that. I guess under these circumstances, I can't expect a social visit or a reunion celebration. No home-baked pie. No sitting out on the porch drinking a couple of jars of shine. No, Bubba, I guess not. Oh wait, maybe you just might. I guess I could make you a chocolate X-Lax pie that would do you a world of good. You'd have to forgive me not joining you. I'd be on a diet and couldn't afford the calories. How good is your shine? Best in the state. Matured in a jug for at least 24 hours. Don't want to spill it on any man-made fibers, though, so dress in 100% pure American cotton. Not sure that would go with X-Lax, so maybe I'll pass on the pie. How about I stock up on snacks? Maybe salted pretzels or some low-fat designer chips. Will your diet allow that? She grinned, shook her head, and mockingly scolded, Bubba, you're such a smooth talker. I bet the birds fly down from the trees to greet you every morning, just like Snow White. I laughed at the image. Well, now you mention it. Some days this place feels like Walt Disney. I've spent whole mornings just watching the nature around me. Times like that are good for the soul, better than meditation. She nodded. I wasn't sure if she truly got what I meant, but she did seem to understand this place meant something important to me. She had never seen the heat and sheer desolation of the sandbox, and I truly hoped she never would, so she wouldn't be able to relate to my relief at being home in my own lush backyard. Sure, there are oases of green in the Middle East, but home is where the heart is, and this was my place, free and clear. Then we went inside to eat together at the table again. As we ate, I changed the story about the ransom. You'll be glad to hear that your father has finally put the red card up in the window. I'll call him tomorrow using the burner phone and see what he has to say. She seemed genuinely pleased that the process of getting her back home with her family had finally started. I hoped it would keep her more cooperative. The last thing I wanted was for her to think I had no intention of releasing her. I wouldn't blame her if she completely lost it after getting that idea. I'd probably have to restrain her to control her anger, and hurting her was not part of my plan. Her hurting me and her frustration was also not a desired outcome. Anyway, she didn't express any suspicions. The strawberry shortcake went down well, and I made us both a mug of herbal tea to aid digestion. She liked the taste, and we chatted a little as we sipped it. I stood in her room and talked with her a bit longer before locking her in for the night, actually wishing her a good night's sleep, and meaning it. The next morning, I pushed her breakfast and lunch rations into her room without waking her. I did my day's work, stopped at the food store, and headed back to the cabin. I checked my notes in my own bedroom before going to fetch her for supper. She asked me straight away, what did my father say? I played him the message he recorded, and, of course, he then played for time, saying he couldn't possibly raise that kind of money. I told him I knew for sure he could. I said I'd call him again tomorrow. On my way out of town, I checked again. The red card was still there, so he hadn't made any progress today. On Thursday, I told her the card was still red, that her father had called and offered me $100,000, and that I told him no way. All eyes, of course. She told me she needed some feminine hygiene products. I guessed it was that time of the month. Pads or tampons? Do you need anything for pain relief? She was clearly surprised that I knew enough to ask. I guess a man wasn't supposed to understand that kind of thing, but I'd been with Cassie for 5 years and had endured her monthly symptoms most of those. Yeah, that was another thing about my ex that I wasn't regretting. Oh, please. A pack of Advil wouldn't hurt, just in case I get cramps. No problem. I'll get you some more panties as well. You'll need to bag the soiled ones up for me to burn. The composting privy won't take them. They just make it smell bad. Size 6. She looked at me strangely. I guess I must have slept through that part of kidnapper school where they said to take every opportunity to humiliate your victim about her bodily functions. Darn. There went even more of my credibility. Thank you. Least I can do. I could have bitten off my tongue for saying that, offering her the chance to think that releasing her was an even better idea. She obviously wasn't quite on top of her game because she missed the opening I'd accidentally given her. We ate the evening meal together at the table, finishing with a mint tea again. We talked some more, exchanging a few stories about our school lives. Turned out I wasn't the only one who considered a lot of the dumb jocks I'd run across as arrogant waste of oxygen. She was cooperative as I locked her back in her room for the night. I guess she wanted me to deliver on the promises I'd made to help her deal with her monthly cycle. I had no choice but to attend a mandatory guard drill that weekend. So, Friday after work, I did a major shop. I remembered all the hygiene products she needed, and I found a range of canned fruit in small plastic tubs that didn't require refrigeration. I chose the ones in juice rather than syrup, buying a mixed dozen. I also picked up a couple of bags of fresh fruit, knowing she'd appreciate them. For our supper, I stopped off at a place I knew was the best in town for takeout chicken wings. As soon as I got back to the cabin, I pulled on the ski mask and let her out, telling her that hot wings would be on the table in just a minute. I'd also picked up a couple of 24-ounce sodas. She chose the Coke rather than the root beer. The wings were as good as ever, and we both had to wipe our hands and faces afterwards. Lucky I'd picked up some paper tissues while I was in that part of the store. Coffee and cheesecake? Yes, please. I set the machine going. She had tidied up the table by the time I finished. I opened the cooler and pulled out the 2 portions of New York cheesecake I'd bought at the store, passing her a tray and a fork. Then I gave her the bag of feminine items. She looked inside, thanked me, and took it back to her room. The coffee was ready by the time she came back. Get paid today, Bubba? I chuckled. Actually, yes, I did. But that's not the reason why we're eating well tonight. I just fancied hot wings for a change and thought you might enjoy them as well. They were great. I don't get to eat them very often. My mother doesn't like the smell in the house. But these were some of the best I've had for a while. Well, if you want to have them as good as this again, you need to visit Barker's Little Restaurant. It's at the junction of Buchanan and Mitchell. You can eat in, so you won't get grief from your mom. She smiled at the thought. I guessed I'd given her hope that pretty soon she'd be free to go as she pleased. Thanks. I'll remember that. I've passed it, never gone in. We talked some more as we ate the cheesecake and sipped the coffee. You know, the kind of things you discuss when you're beginning to get to know someone. The sports you played, the books you liked, the movies you've seen several times, your best and worst teachers at school. Nothing heavy, just casual talk. I began to see her more as a normal human being. To my surprise, her tastes were much the same as mine. It was good to be able to just chat with a new person without the pressures of feeling like I was on a first date and had to pass the test if I hoped to have a second one. That reminded me, I hadn't dated since I'd met Cassie, so I'd be even more out of practice when I did slip back into the dating pool. Of course, possessing only an off-grid cabin several miles out of town, a battered old truck, and hopefully a daughter, a lot of the ladies wouldn't think I was much of a catch. I had assumed Miss Grayson had led a privileged childhood. My guess was that she'd gone to a private school. But no, she told me she'd attended the local high school. That was probably what made her seem a little more normal than I'd expected. She wasn't a snob or as high society as I'd figured when I'd seen that society page photograph. After a bit longer, she yawned, covering her mouth out of habitual politeness. I guess I'd better head for bed. Thanks for the meal. I told her good night as I closed and locked her door. This time, she responded, Okay, so I'm a kidnapper. Sure. I know that I should have had her chained to a wall in a basement, lying in her own filth, eating thin gruel once a day out of a rusty bucket using her hands, shivering in the cold as she tried to sleep on moldy straw, flinching every time the steel door clanged open in case she was going to be beaten or assaulted again. But I'm not like that. She was just a kid, mere collateral damage in my fight back against her father and what he'd allowed to be done to me. I hoped he and his stuck-up wife were both lying sleepless in their beds, worrying about where their only child was. I'd keep her safe. He was the one who needed to suffer. By week 3, early on Saturday morning before dawn, I quietly sneaked a whole pile of food, bottled water, and a couple more books into her room while she was still fast asleep. Without any sense of time other than the radio, I guessed her natural rhythms were disrupted. I had seen the same thing in Iraq when bright electric lights were on day and night, with no windows to the outside. It was easy to lose track of time. Heck, it was going to be September in a couple of days. I would have bet money that without the radio, she wouldn't have known how many days she'd been here. Then I grabbed my bag, locked up carefully, set a few markers, and drove off to the city and the armory. It was good to see the guys again, but I stayed quiet and let them do all the talking. They were so caught up telling stories about what they'd been doing that no one actually asked me how Ally and Cassie were doing. I kept silent. I was close to the guys, but not close enough friends to confide that my life had fallen apart and my happy family was no more. The weekend was just routine annual training and company administration. Even when we had to do the mandatory annual verification of next of kin, I stayed quiet. It's a serious military offense to declare or certify something false. But I was prepared to take the risk rather than admit my marriage had exploded so spectacularly. Maybe I'm too prideful, but I still felt I had somehow failed, that I was at fault. Keeping quiet a little longer was the easy way out. The guard already had my new postal address and knew to contact me through Harry Hamilton if there was an emergency call-up. I just didn't mention that I wasn't living with my ex anymore. There was a lot of standing in line that day. I hate to admit it, but I spent much of that time thinking about my captive, hoping she was okay while I was gone. Not that I worried she could escape or anyone would find and rescue her. It was more about whether I'd left enough food and water, if the lighting was working, and if she wasn't bored out of her mind. Okay, so I missed it. I should have realized right then that the amber warning light was blinking. I didn't. That afternoon, my platoon went down to the rifle range to qualify officially and keep the records up to date. Then we went back to the armory to clean up and eat. I went out for a couple of beers with some of the guys Saturday night, but my heart wasn't in it, so I headed back to my cot at the armory early. The next morning, we did some vehicle maintenance and servicing. I headed home as soon as we were released from duty Sunday afternoon. I still hadn't told anyone, not even the guys in my platoon who knew about the scars I had from my teenage years, that I'd been divorced after returning from Iraq. It was personal information, not something for casual talk. With an unwilling guest locked in my cabin, I didn't want any outside interest in my private affairs. Having a friend drop by for a beer and a chat would have been a disaster. I was glad to get away. On my way back through town, I bought a bucket of fried chicken for Miss Grayson. I also included a Coke, fries, a side salad, and a frozen milkshake. I was pretty sure that after being alone all weekend, she'd be pretty upset with me, but I hoped a good meal might improve her mood a bit. I approached the cabin warily, checking all the signs. It looked like no one had been around, but leaving her alone for a whole weekend had been a bit risky. There was always a small chance a nosy neighbor or a door-to-door visitor might come by. Mask on. I slipped the key into the lock of her door as quietly as possible, but somehow she still heard it and was waiting by the door. I pushed the tray toward her with my foot, showing her the taser in my hand. Eat that, and then I'll come talk to you. I locked her in, brought my guard gear into my bedroom, sorted out a few things, and then went to see how she was doing. She'd eaten everything I had brought her. I faced her, studying her through the holes of my ski mask. I'm really sorry I had to leave you alone so long, Miss Grayson. I hope you weren't too bored. It was a mandatory guard drill weekend, and I had no choice but to attend. I guess you can understand why I couldn't tell you in advance. Not that you could have escaped in that time, but you might have injured your fingers trying to wear down the mesh for 30 hours, and it wouldn't have gotten you anywhere. She sighed. I guessed you'd be away for a while when you left me all that food and those books. I've already figured out that you lined the walls and ceiling with mesh. I fell down the toilet hole and found the edges there too. I know the door is the only way out of this room, and the sheet steel on the back told me I'd be wasting my time there as well. I thought you might be away just for a night. I hoped it wouldn't be any longer. I knew it was the weekend because of the radio. I stared at her, impressed by her reasoning. I owe you some fresh air. Do you want to bathe, or just take a walk? How much daylight do we have left? Enough for both. Bath first, please, Bubba. No problem. Come on. I took her down to the creek, walked a few yards away, and turned my back to her. I stood listening to the sounds of the woods until she called out that she was done. I turned around to find her standing there, dressed and ready to go. You look a whole lot better clean-shaven. Bubba, the scruffy beard makes it seem like you don't care about your appearance. I laughed. Thanks. I think the beard is necessary, but you're right. I prefer not to have it. Now, if we keep quiet, I thought I heard some deer barking. We might get lucky and see them out front. We did, but only caught the flash of their white tails as they hurried away through the trees. We must have made too much noise. The girl smiled with delight that she had seen something at all. We dropped the washing bag and towels off on the porch. I kept hold of the taser as we walked around the property. How much land do you have? A quarter section, 160 acres. I realized I'd accidentally shared a piece of real information, so I quickly added some filler. This whole area was divided up into homesteads after the Civil War when there weren't enough owners or laborers to run plantations or big farms. They're all about that size. I guess that was the standard homestead or land grant back then. She nodded in understanding. Our area avoided the worst excesses of the post-war carpetbaggers. I guess there was more rule of law here and less to be gained than farther south and west. A lot of the mountain men further up the river wouldn't have been happy about being taken over by outsiders and Yankees, so it wouldn't have been easy for the newcomers. It's really peaceful. You know, I'm almost jealous. Maybe just a bit too rustic for you. She giggled. Yeah, I grew up having hot water for my baths, and I kind of miss it. I laughed with her. Me too. Maybe one day I'll figure out a way to get it here. You can get solar kits for warming swimming pools, so I might look into something like that. Make myself a smaller bathing spot away from the creek flow. It'll take some thinking. We strolled for a while longer until the sky started turning pinkish purple with the sunset and the air cooled down. I led us back to the cabin. She turned as we stepped onto the porch. Thanks. After 48 hours in that room, I needed to be out for a while. Maybe we can do this again. Sure. Thanks for not trying to run off on me. You wouldn't have made it, and it would have spoiled the occasion to have to zap you. I'm working tomorrow. Do you need anything stocked up? She thought for a moment. Yeah, I could use a bucket of water for washing, but otherwise, I'm okay at the moment. Some more fruit would be nice. Okay, I'll do that in the morning. She looked a bit hesitant. I've got some trash for you to burn. I knew it was her used pads. I didn't want to embarrass her any further. No problem. Give it to me after breakfast. Do you need any more Advil? She shook her head. No, thanks. I'm fine. Okay. If you need anything else, just ask. She looked at me a little strangely, as if I was confusing her expectations. I ushered her into her room and locked the door, then gratefully pulled off the itchy ski mask, tidied up a few things, and went to bed. You know something? I'd almost gotten to the stage where I wanted to be kind to her. If I'd read her expressions correctly, she had come some way toward treating me as a fellow human being. I made a bet with myself that it wasn't going to last. That recognition was the red warning light. Once again, I missed it. Monday, I scrambled us both some eggs for breakfast, served at the table with pre-cooked, packaged biscuits. Long life, so goodness only knows what keeps them fresh. They're okay as a reserve, but I try not to have them too often. She didn't comment. I gave her the bucket of water she'd requested and passed along another case of bottled water and some supplies for her lunch. She handed me a well-wrapped trash bag. I put it in a dumpster at work when I got there rather than go to the trouble of lighting a fire to burn it. During my lunch hour, I picked up some more fruit and vegetables. Having a guest was good for me. I was certainly eating better, healthier, more green stuff than usual. Hey, I hadn't bought my usual bulk box of 18 Zagnut candy bars or even a Moon bar since her arrival. Cooking meals for two had definitely cut down on my lonely snacking. I was even showing interest in what else was on offer in the food section, rather than just grabbing what I normally bought. I saw some vacuum-packed meatballs that looked okay, and I added to my cart the ingredients for a ratatouille sauce, which wouldn't take long to cook over the Coleman stove and would fill us both up nicely. Yeah, it might have been better baked in an oven, but the flavor was there, even if the stirred texture was a little lacking, more like a vegetable stew with meatballs dotted around. I think it missed out on what they call plate appeal in the overpriced big city restaurants. Out here in the real world, we're more concerned with flavor, nutrition, and value. Anyway, my dinner guest said she enjoyed it. She certainly cleared her plate and accepted another couple of spoonfuls to help empty the pan. She was a little quiet and went off to her room after we both had a herbal tea. I locked the doors and hit the hay myself. I hit the store again when I got off work Tuesday. This time they had some ready-to-eat shrimp and sauce on offer, so I bought us both a pack. I checked the telltale signs when I got to the driveway, saw they were good, and went inside. Through the spy hole, I could see her lying under the blanket. I was just about to open the door and ask if she was okay when, fortunately, my training and self-preservation instincts kicked in. There was no reason for her to be fully covered, not even showing her hair. Something wasn't right. I took a few minutes to serve up our meal on the table, then silently unlocked her door and pushed it open without going inside. Supper's ready if you want it. I stepped back where I could still see the doorway. After a long 2 or 3 minutes, she emerged from beside the opening. My guess was that she'd been standing with her back to the wall, ready to jump me when I went in. She was very quiet, and I kept it that way. Personally, I'd have thought my choice of menu deserved another compliment, but she didn't comment at all. Okay, so all I'd actually had to do was open a couple of packets on the plates, but the thought was there. They tasted good. Quality protein, low in fat, and they'd been on sale. What wasn't alike? After we'd eaten, I collected the taser from my bedroom, locking the door behind me before turning back to her. I could just tell she was up to something. That made me a bit more abrupt with her than I'd been recently. Tommy, get yourself some more fresh air. Let's take a walk. Remember, it hurts to be tasered, and if you mess around with me, you'll be staying in your cell. Darn it. I hadn't meant to, but in my irritation, I'd used a harsher word. I was pretty sure she'd picked up on it, but she didn't say anything. I noticed she watched closely as I unlocked and unbarred the door to the outside. She wasn't to know that I'd already removed one chain and heavy-duty padlock that morning, nor that there was another chain on the outside when I left for work. Another thing the military taught me, never rely on just one line of defense. Always have a backup, something in reserve the enemy doesn't know about. So even if she somehow knocked me out and found the keys, she wouldn't know the code for the combination padlock. We took a circuit around the clearing. I would have liked to let her walk in the woods a bit. It was really pretty, but it would have given her too many chances to try to escape between the trees. Speaking of which, I moved closer when we got near the driveway. She was wary, remembering the cord trap she'd fallen over, and made no attempt to run. It was a really lovely evening, the kind where it's good to sit quietly and enjoy the place. You want to drink a beer on the porch? It's not ice cold, but it's cool. I could see her thinking. She didn't want to give me the victory of doing something almost normal and civilized, but she could definitely stand a beer, especially if it kept her out of herself a little longer. I gave her an unopened can and stood drinking mine, watching her closely. She popped the can and took a swig. Do you often have girls out here drinking beer on your porch? I stayed silent. She was actually the first woman I'd had a drink with since I returned home, but she didn't need to know that. She might have pegged me as a sad weirdo, which wasn't exactly true. I just had temporary trust issues with women. You know how it is when your wife runs off with another man. Kind of changes your outlook on life. Don't like personal questions, do you, Bubba? Okay, back to business. Anything from my father? I've been thinking about the next steps for collecting her ransom money for a while. I guess my thoughts had kind of crystallized on the Sunday drive back from the city. From what I'd read, there were 3 especially risky times for kidnappers: the initial abduction, any contact with the victim's family, and picking up the ransom. As long as you didn't let your victim escape or contact anyone, the rest of the time, there was almost no chance the authorities would actively find you. I'd gotten away with not being observed when I took her. I hadn't contacted her father, and she still didn't know who I was, what I looked like, or where she was being held. So far, so good. But that didn't help me move the process forward. The problem was that collecting the money without being caught was going to be really difficult as a solo operator, maybe impossible. I couldn't watch my own back or check out the local area while picking up the cash, and I'd be really vulnerable if the cops or feds were called in. Did I want a chance at getting the money, or was the risk too high? Spending the next 50 years in prison was one hell of a high price to pay for failure. Was the ransom really worth risking capture? It had been 7 months since I last saw my daughter. Maybe Ally had already forgotten me or thought I'd given up on her. Perhaps my ex-wife had told her I was dead or had simply abandoned them both. Was there even much point in fighting to get Ally back? I was torn, but I was starting to lean toward the idea that I might just as well release her and move on with my life. Maybe someday find another woman I could love and trust enough to have children with. The big advantage of not going after the ransom was that I wouldn't have to risk getting caught. I could just sedate Miss Grayson, drop her off somewhere safe, and try to forget I'd ever done it. I was pretty sure she didn't know enough to track me down, though telling her I was in the Guard might have been a big mistake. Our town wasn't that small, but only 3 or 4 of us were involved with the Guard. Maybe before I let her go, I could convince her that my membership in the Guard was actually the fantasy she accused me of living. But after our fight, I wasn't sure if trust still had a chance. Maybe I'd sign up for another active duty tour, get out of the country for 6 months or a year, then come back. Although that wouldn't be the right thing to do, I'd be letting Harry Hamilton down. Geez, I needed to think this through before making any final decisions. Yeah, I know. I was in a bad place. The smart thing would have been to just let her go quietly and disappear. The problem with that option was she didn't deserve to suffer just because her father was a crooked judge, and I knew it. So, I kept lying to Miss Grayson. I laid it on thick this time. She was getting too confident, and she needed a reminder that things weren't equal. I'm pretty sure he's gone to the cops. He keeps stalling, saying he can't get the cash together so fast because the bank has to report every transaction over 10,000. So he's only halfway there. I told him you wouldn't like being held in the basement 1 minute longer than necessary, and my friends are starting to sniff around, suggesting we all get a cut of the ransom before we let you go. All he said was he's doing his best, but he'd hunt us down himself if anything happened to you. Then I hung up because we talked long enough. I'm going to get another burner phone and ditch this one in the river. She shook her head, looking disappointed. So, how much longer am I going to be in this basement of yours? Looks like another 10 days until he has no excuse for not having the money, because he's dragging it out. I won't keep the first 2 meetings we set up. I'll just drive by and check if he's trying to ambush me. That'll probably make it take longer. Say a fortnight, 3 weeks tops. She sighed. She didn't like hearing that. Not at all. And if they do catch you, he has to give me a plea deal before I tell him where you are. And if they shoot you, you'd better hope they find my truck parked somewhere and follow the lead back to the cabin before you run out of food and water. She scowled and stood up. You are a real scumbag, Bubba. I despise you here. I don't want any more of your beer. I'm going to bed. She shoved the can toward me. I set it on a chair, followed her inside, and into her room. I wanted a closer look at the shape under her bedding. Yeah, just as I'd guessed through the spy hole, she'd balled up most of her stuff to make it look like she was under the blanket. I figured she'd hoped I'd walk in so she could push me over from behind, maybe lock me up and make her escape. It wouldn't have mattered. The key to the heavy-duty padlock securing the cabin door was around my neck, and the combination was only in my head, so she'd have had to let me out eventually. I felt a little guilty for being so harsh and reminding her she was under my control, but she'd been getting too bold. I pointed at the bed. Nice try, sweetie. Here's the deal. I'll always carry a note saying where you are, so if I ever get arrested or worse, you'll be found. No reply. I wished her good night, left the room, and locked the door. She'd left half her beer. I hadn't seen her spit in it, so I drank it rather than waste it and went to bed myself. I'd upset her, trying to be too clever. I still didn't know how this was going to play out. Despite the beer, I didn't sleep well. I felt sick with myself for causing her unnecessary distress. That was the moment when the alarm bell should have gone off in my head. But they didn't. By Wednesday morning, along with her usual lunch cheese sandwich, I made a dozen pancakes and slipped half on a paper plate through her door with a travel mug of coffee as a peace offering, then went off to work. That evening, I called her for supper again at the table. It was simple: ham, eggs, hash browns, and a store-bought dessert, but she ate it all. Polite but quiet. She answered my attempts at conversation with just enough words. When we finished, she asked for a couple of pieces of fruit, then went back to her room. I locked her door and lay down on my own bed, read for a while, and eventually dozed off. Thursday night, she tried a different approach. When I got home from work in the store, I looked through the spy hole and saw her lying on her bed. I knocked and told her food was almost ready. No response. I gently pushed the door open. When she noticed me, she smiled, trying to provoke a reaction. The whole thing felt staged, so I kept my cool. See anything you like? She asked playfully. I chuckled. It's quite a sight, Miss Grayson. You're a beautiful woman, but I have a feeling this is just a distraction. I'm not falling for it. Thanks for the offer, though. Food's ready if you're hungry. Come out when you're ready. She joined me at the table, now fully dressed. Part of me was relieved. It made it easier to stay focused. Despite everything, her natural beauty still shone through. I offered her a choice of chocolate or strawberry milk. She chose chocolate and smiled when she realized it was still cold from the store's chilled section. I plated the cold cuts and salads nicely, with a rice and sweet pepper salad adding a pop of color. She grinned as she sat down. You really went all out with the presentation. Looks great. I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. There was a sore spot there. I hadn't been intimate for 7 months, not since before Iraq. It had taken all my willpower to turn down her offer. Only the immediate certainty that it was a trap stopped me from throwing off my own clothes and calling her bluff. Sorry to disappoint you, sweetie, but I'm not that naive. I'd certainly agree that you've got everything for us to have a lot of fun, but I can't. It wouldn't be right. She laughed. Unethical, Mr. Straight? A straight arrow wouldn't dream of abducting a helpless woman. How do you square that one? I shrugged. Sorry, sweetie. I know it's hard to believe. Yes, I did abduct you. Now, I've got a moral responsibility to keep you safe until your father pays the ransom and you come home unharmed. I promised him you're okay, and I keep my promises. She stared at me hard. I held her gaze even though hers was sharp and intense. She looked at me for what felt like forever. Bubba, I've got a real problem with what you just said. You know, you've told me several times now that you talked to him. The problem is, I don't see how that could be true. See, I made up the cell number I gave you. I just invented it. I couldn't remember his actual number because it's saved in my smartphone, so I never dial it. He's a judge, so his personal number isn't public, just like our home number isn't in the directory. So, there's no way you could have spoken to him. How's my dad supposed to pay a ransom when he doesn't even know where or when? I almost grinned at her. Yeah, she was definitely a worthy opponent, but I managed to keep a straight face. It wouldn't have gone over well, and she had silverware close by. Okay, Miss Grayson, you got me. I'm sorry for lying to you. I didn't want to worry you or make you think for a moment that you wouldn't be going home. You mean I'm going home soon? Absolutely. It's all planned, just maybe not right now. A couple more weeks, and then I'm dropping you off where I found you. You don't know who I am or where you've been. I'll put you out, wrap you in a bed sheet from Goodwill to prevent you from picking up any traces from here, let you down in the parking lot, put you in the recovery position, and drive off before you wake up. Her face flushed as she tried to process what I just said. A moment of silence, then she spoke, quiet and cold at first. Let me get this straight. You kidnapped me so you could keep me captive for a while, then release me without ever receiving a ransom? My family has been worried sick. I've been scared out of my mind and missed the start of my junior year of college. So, this semester might not count unless I take summer classes and all for nothing? Thanks a lot. Why on earth did you kidnap me? I stared back at her. Her timing was perfect. Her outburst snapped me out of my mood and gave me some backbone just as I was about to apologize again. So, I told her like it was. You want to know why I kidnapped you? Simple. Your father, that crooked judge, took my daughter away from me while I was serving in Iraq. Then, with his help, my ex-wife stole my house and all my assets, sealing the records so I couldn't fight back. I have no chance of getting my little girl back. So I took his daughter for a while, just so he could feel a little of the pain. She exploded up from her chair, which tipped over behind her unnoticed. She got right in my face as I stood up too. You can't be serious. Your wife divorced your sorry self, and now you're taking it out on me. No, I'm taking your father's behavior out on you. I want him to feel what it's like not to know where his daughter is. To lie awake at night, wondering if she's okay, what's happening to her, if he'll ever see her again. I'm sorry you, an innocent party, have to suffer the inconvenience. But I'd do it all over again just to make him hurt a little. She cut me off, anger burning in her eyes. Inconvenience? Are you serious? I've lost 3 weeks of my life. I'm going to be swamped at college, and you call this an inconvenience? How can someone be so ignorant? I shrugged casually, like I cared. Whatever, sweetie. You won't like this, but you're just collateral damage. It's between your father and me, and you're the only weakness I can exploit to get back at him. Now, calm down and listen, then we can talk about getting you home. I sat back down, trying to calm things down a bit. I didn't want the situation to get worse and close off any options. If she physically attacked me, I'd take the first hit to protect myself, but then I'd defend myself enough to stop her, and I'd win. She glared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her chair and sat back down. All right, I don't like it. This is so crazy, I can barely believe it. It's like a never-ending nightmare. I sighed deeply. Okay, I'll start over. While I was deployed, my ex divorced me for desertion. Your father signed the papers. He gave my ex all my assets. Everything except the truck parked at the armory in this cabin, which she didn't know about. He gave her custody of my daughter, but he was cruel about it. His ruling made it clear I'd never see Ally again. A restraining order and sealed judgment. How can I even find out where she is? If I ever see her, even by accident, I'd be breaking the restraining order. He's getting off lightly, because he'll get you back home. I guess I've lost my daughter forever. I didn't even know I was divorced until I got back from Iraq and found other people living in what I thought was my house. You didn't have a lawyer? That was dumb. No wonder you got screwed. Just what I'd expect from some ignorant redneck. You're so full of it, sweetie. I didn't even know I was in court. I knew nothing except I hadn't had any letters from home for weeks. I got back to my house, found it was sold, and someone else was living there. When I showed up, they gave me the papers left for me. She paused. The anger faded, replaced by curiosity. Seriously? You didn't know? You weren't served? Honestly, cross my heart. I knew nothing. I was in Iraq. No letters, no emails, no calls, nothing. But Dad can't have been part of it. There's no way he'd sign off on something so unfair. He'd want to hear your side. You must have had some representation. It's the law. Miss Grayson, I promise. I had no chance to say anything. It was a done deal long before I found out. I wasn't served or even told. One hearing, and it was final. I can't believe that. Dad always follows the rules. I sighed. I'll show you. I unlocked my bedroom, grabbed the papers, and turned to the page with Judge Warren Cornell Grayson's signature. She looked shocked, scanning the document quickly. The college pre-law student in her was interested now. Something didn't add up. That's my dad's signature. I'm sure he had his reasons, but this looks like an unfair settlement, especially if what you say is true. Mr. Grant McKinney, and you were overseas at the time, I said, laughing softly. I'd forgotten my own name was on the same page. This was turning into a mess of my own making. Okay, 1 point for the good guys. Call me Grant. I guess I can forget about the ski mask now. You have my name, and that's a lot more useful than a vague description. At least I have the connections to get a new identity and a new life across the country. I pulled off the mask. It felt like a relief not to have to wear it anymore. She studied my face closely. You look younger than I thought. How old are you? 26. She giggled. My bad. I pegged you for 30, maybe 35. You're so quiet and deliberate. Like you've forgotten how to have fun. I guess active service and losing your family can do that to you. There was a long silence. She bit her lip, concentrating. Her eyes were open but unfocused. I found it very attractive, and I admit I took a good long look at her, trying to hold that image in my mind for the future. Yeah, I think that was the moment I started to feel something for my prisoner. Stockholm Syndrome can go both ways. I had been overconfident. Hubris got the better of me, and it was laughing at me like crazy. Eventually, she stirred. Mind if we go sit on the porch again? I need to think. I give you my word, Grant. I won't try to escape tonight. I chuckled. Maybe you want to eat something first? She looked surprised. I guessed that with all the drama, she had completely forgotten about the plates of food on the table. It was just a simple deli salad, so no great harm was done by the delay. It, along with the cold milk, had just warmed up a little. We ate it, and I cleared the plates before returning to my seat. I realized my options were now either a whole lot more limited or maybe less complicated. Looking on the bright side, kill her and stay here, or release her and leave town immediately to build a new life. My original plan had been to use the ransom your father would pay for your safe return to hire some smart lawyers and try to reverse his decision about Ally. But as a one-man operation, it was way too risky for me to collect the money. That's why I gave up on the ransom idea and just wanted to make him worry about you. Now that you know who I am, I'll need a couple of days to prepare to leave, and then I'll drop you off on my way out of town. She nodded slowly, thinking it over. Would a beer out on the porch help you think? She looked really surprised at that offer. Thanks. It sure would. I had decided I had nothing to lose. If she escaped tonight and the authorities caught me, I'd be able to expose her father in federal court with the press listening to every word. It wouldn't keep me out of prison, but it would put a stop to his actions. I was pretty sure I could handle myself in prison. It wouldn't be all that different from my time in Iraq or the life I lived now, except the food would be worse. 3 meals and a cot isn't too bad. This time, I wouldn't have to wear a helmet or body armor or worry about roadside IEDs every time we went out. It would be unpleasant and boring, but survivable. The only person who'd really be hurt by all this was my boss, Harry Hamilton. He'd been good to me and invested in my future. If I released Miss Grayson and moved a few states west to start over, he'd still lose out. I'd have to write him a real apologetic letter expressing my gratitude and remorse before I left. Oh, and a second letter to resign from the Guard. That would be tough. I'd miss my comrades. They were a great group most of the time. She tried to hide it, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes when I removed my mask and opened the door, motioning for her to go ahead. Once she was out on the porch, I went back inside the cabin and brought us both a beer and a glass. She had given me her word, and I had shown that I trusted her to keep it. Oddly, in my book, that put her in a tougher spot. She was the one with the inner conflict between running away and breaking her promise. First, I needed to get some more guilt off my chest. Miss Grayson, I owe you another apology. I lied to you about contacting your father. I haven't reached out to him at all, not even a letter. I don't know if he even realizes you've been taken or if he thinks you just ran off somewhere to find yourself. I'm truly sorry I had to deceive you, but at the time, it seemed like the best choice. I couldn't tell you I was going to keep you locked up for at least 6 weeks before sending you home. You needed something to believe in day to day. I expected a glass of beer in my face. Instead, I saw her smile break through, and I heard her giggle. I suspected that for a while, she said. Ever since you told me you called him on that made-up number. You confirmed a few minutes ago you didn't mail a letter either. It made sense you never tried to prove I was still alive. That made me think I was on the right track. I had to shake my head in admiration. You're more than just a beautiful face, aren't you? You're pretty smart. Not many people in your position would have figured that out and been able to live with it without giving themselves away. Oh wait, does that explain Tuesday's attempt to knock me out and tonight's little test of my morals? In the half-light, I could still see she blushed at my reference to her earlier invitation. I chuckled. I'll take that as a yes. I have to be honest, Miss Grayson. I'm really impressed with you. You're trying to take control here, and in a way, you've just scored a major point. You got me so caught up in the rightness of my cause that I was dumb enough to reveal my identity. It's going to be a real blow to have to move away and start over. And I'm going to have to inconvenience my boss, and he's been decent to me. I'll hate leaving him in the lurch. Anyway, I'll shut up now and leave you to think. Holler if you need me. I went back inside the cabin to tidy up and do some chores, leaving her alone on the porch. 10 minutes later, I brought us both another beer. She hadn't moved, still sitting on the step, gazing out, rubbing the underside of her chin with my pen. She absently thanked me as I refilled her glass. I took a short stroll outside to enjoy the evening air and the sounds of the trees. It looked like this would be one of the last times I'd enjoy my own private piece of real estate. I was sure she was going to go free. This place was special, but not special enough for me to live with the guilt of hurting her to keep her silent. I guess that's when I admitted to myself that there was no way I could ever intentionally hurt that girl. I respected her, cared about her, and in my own way wanted to protect her. Over the past week, I'd unconsciously put her on a pedestal. Damn Stockholm Syndrome. It's more subtle than they warned us in training. I guess that's why they kept moving us around the jail. So we never spent enough time with detainees to really understand them or feel sympathy for their situation. About 40 minutes later, it was getting too dark for her to see the pad of paper she was writing on, let alone read her notes. She shifted, moving her head from side to side to ease the stiffness from sitting still so long. Bedtime, I guess. Yeah. Want anything to eat or drink? No, I'm good, thanks. I escorted her to her door. She turned at the threshold. Grant, thanks again for not losing it when I found out your name and was dumb or arrogant enough to call you on it. My guess is a criminal kidnapper would have hurt me or worse to protect themselves. You respected me. That makes you different. I'll see you in the morning. We need to talk some more. She kissed me on the cheek and looked me in the eyes before turning and entering her room. I did not close or lock her door. Once I locked the outside door, I went to my own bed. I did lock my own door. I didn't want to wake up with her hands around my throat, choking me. That goodnight kiss, that gesture of affection or compassion or whatever it was, really worried me. Did that goodnight kiss mean anything from her besides relief that her ordeal was almost over? And what did she mean by needing to talk some more? Even with my mind racing, I slept a lot better than I expected. I had thought I wouldn't get any sleep at all, but somehow I managed to enjoy a solid 3, maybe 4 hours. I guess some of the contradictions I'd been feeling had settled. I was forced to abandon the lies I hadn't liked telling, and my soul felt lighter now that unwanted baggage was gone. The big decision had been made for me. The kidnapping hadn't worked out, and I was going to have to leave town. The revenge of making her father fear for her safety hadn't been as sweet as I hoped, and it had backfired because I was now going to lose the job, the guard post, and the cabin I loved. In the morning, I didn't wake her. I just checked she was there and slipped a breakfast tray with a travel mug of coffee through the open door shortly before driving off to work. I did close and lock her door, though. I needed her to still be there when I got home that night. Like she said, we probably did need to talk some more for the sake of her future mental health. I didn't want her to suffer unnecessarily from her time as my captive. So, I owed her the chance to get answers to her questions and to sort things out in her mind. She needed to know for sure that no blame or guilt rested on her. I would hate to think that being a solitary prisoner for a while would have caused lasting damage. So, I planned to do the decent thing and honestly answer all her questions. Okay, So I took the coward's way out by not talking to her before leaving for work. But I'd already firmly decided that even though she now knew my name, I was still going to release her anyway and deal with the consequences later. It was a no-brainer, an easy call. Her father was an unpleasant man, but she was innocent. And over time, I discovered she was actually a kind person underneath it all. There was no way on God's green earth that she deserved to pay for her father's sins. I planned to drop her home early in the morning before heading out of town. I'd made a couple of good friends in the Missouri National Guard unit that had been with us, and I was fairly sure one of them would take me in temporarily and help me get set up. That would be far enough away for interest to fade. As long as I left no trail, I might just get away with it. With my construction skills, I could work as an undocumented laborer or handyman, and most homeowners would happily pay cash under the table. There were plenty of migrant workers around. I'd survive just like they did. My needs would be simple enough. Yeah, I'd make out okay. Certainly not as well as if I stayed with Harry Hamilton, but okay. I threw the handcuffs in the dumpster behind Home Depot while picking up some extra supplies on the way to the lumber yard, covering them with some drywall scraps already there. The taser went into the trash bin in the front parking lot. The ski mask ended up in a garbage can where I grabbed lunch for the crew. I stopped by the bank and withdrew $4,000 in cash, leaving only $500 in the account, which I planned to take out at an ATM the next morning to empty it. Not a lot to start a new life. But hey, I'd been left with almost nothing 5 months earlier, thanks to my ex. A month's pay had gone just to rescuing the stuff she'd pawned. Having saved that much so quickly gave me confidence I'd survive. After lunch, I went to the company office with the timesheets for my team. The letter I made Miss Grayson write to her father went straight into Harry Hamilton's office shredder, joining a pile of other unidentifiable paper bound for confidential disposal. No way would that ever see the light of day again. Harry wasn't there, so I was spared the awkwardness of saying goodbye and thank you without him realizing what was happening. I thought about picking up my computer, but figured that might raise suspicion. So, I planned to grab it on my way out of town the next morning. Then I headed back to the site to finish the week. I didn't tell anyone I might be leaving town. I didn't want questions or attention on my movements. I acted as normal as I could, told everyone I'd see them Monday, and warned them not to get too drunk. I made sure all my tools were in the back of the truck. I couldn't afford to leave any behind. I'd gotten rid of all the physical evidence that I'd held her captive. Any prosecutor would struggle to prove abduction beyond a reasonable doubt. If I got arrested, I could claim it was all consensual, that she came to live with me of her own free will. If asked why I ran, I'd say we'd had a falling out. She threatened to accuse me falsely, and since her father was a local judge, I knew I wouldn't get a fair trial. It wasn't a strong defense, but I hoped it would raise enough doubt to make a jury hesitate. I didn't want to make a big deal out of letting her go, marking the end of her ordeal, or trying to get her to go easy on me. I just wanted a couple of hours to get out of the county before she called 911. I got the idea after stopping at the store for fresh supplies after work. It was the end of the work week. Why not have a Friday night celebratory meal as our last supper together? I bought her a special sweet treat. I also picked up a couple of thick ribeye steaks in the store's barbecue marinade, ingredients for a great tomato salad, some slaw and potato salad, a 6-pack of cold beer, and a bottle of wine. I even thought ahead and bought more coffee and a bag of pastries for the morning. A final breakfast before I took her home. I didn't bother stocking up on anything for my journey, just topped off the gas tank. It wouldn't take long to load the rest of my tools and important belongings in the morning, then pick up some fresh supplies before dinner, wherever I was, hopefully somewhere in Georgia. With the Coleman stove, I could take care of myself on the road, eating the canned goods I already had in my larders. Though, I knew from past experience that living off beans and sausages would get old after a few days until I reached my friend's place. I'd have to avoid diners and motels. It could have been a lot worse. I might have had to live on that awful spicy penne pasta from the M menu. When I got home to the cabin for the last time and brought in the groceries, I left the front door wide open and unlocked her door. No mask now. She grinned when she saw my face again. I smiled back. She was easy on the eyes and easy to smile at. I tried to fix that smile in my mind. I very much doubted I'd ever see it again in person after tonight. If I did, it would probably be from the witness stand. And if it went that far, the trial might not end well. Better not to take the chance and just disappear. Dear listeners, the next part of this story will be released soon. Please share your thoughts in the comments below And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.